happens. Let me know when you see going live.
Well, I see a live up there.
We're
I see
live.
yes.
We are live. And I was just telling Paul that meeting him is what was like meeting like Moses. Like, sorry, for those of you who are observing watching this, don't mean to be like a little flip, but yours was the first book, I think one of the two first books that I found. And
wow,
it's a life for me. So I'm so excited about this.
Well, I'm very excited to be here with you because you're one of the top sex therapists in the country.
Oh my God, that is such a sweet thing to
Bar
say.
none.
From your mouth to God's ears. I hope that happens. So, Paul, I just want to introduce, this is Paul Joannides. Paul is a psychoanalyst, which I don't even think I knew, but is fascinating. And most importantly, Paul wrote a book called The Guide to Getting It On, which is the preeminent book about sex. The Ultimate Sex Book Club is basically reading it together this month. So if you join that, you'll be part of it. But it's used by college campuses. It's used on college curriculum. Tell us about how you got started doing that book, Paul. It was in 1994,
Well,
right?
just to tell you, I received a letter from the California Department of Corrections. Someone tried to send a copy of the book to, I guess, a prisoner. And the warden sent me this page, this letter, and it's got all of the pages of the illustrations which were unacceptable to the State Department of Corrections.
When was this?
And I'm thinking, okay, the warden's looking through this book, trying to find all the dirty pictures. He's got this categorical list of why I've been banned. And then a week later, I get a letter from the head of the California Department of Corrections that my book is inappropriate for prisoners.
Wait, when was this?
Oh, 2 weeks ago.
No.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes. So it's
mind-boggling.
Isn't it?
Oh, and you think the world has changed since you started. So talk about what happened with this book. What made you write this book? 1994, right?
People have always asked me that, and I generally, the best answer I can come up with is revenge for 8 years in Catholic school. That's my best answer.
I love it. Yeah. But I'm going to push a little more because you're working as a psychoanalyst at the time, and you thought there was a dearth of information, or like what?
I was, I'm a research psychoanalyst, and I was working. I had always had young male patients, teens, early 20s, and I was absolutely shocked at the lack of helpful information for them about sex. And I'm still shocked at the lack of helpful information for them about sex. But so I just started working on it and started writing it. And it took me 10 years to write the first edition. And you might say, well, why was that? Well, here I spent like 3 years working on it. And I thought, oh God, I've got this great book. And I had about 220 pages, 30 pages. And so I handed it to a friend who's a playwright. And I said, would you mind looking at this and let me know what you think? So a few weeks later, she hands it back. And I thumbed through the whole thing. And there's maybe 3 paragraphs in the whole book that are highlighted. And I thought, God, those are the only 3 that she thinks are bad. That's great. And so I talked to her and she said, you see those 3 paragraphs that I highlighted? And I said, yeah. She said, get rid of the rest of this dog. Those are the only 3 paragraphs that spoke to me. She said, the rest of it sounded like a bad outtake from a woman's magazine. It had no soul. It was awful. And so, God, I threw the whole darn thing.
Is that really what happened?
That's really what happened. And so I threw the whole thing away and started drinking a lot of tequila and writing while I was drinking tequila. And what happened was that tequila helped me get past that harsh Catholic, shame-filled, guilt-filled God that I grew up with. So I eventually learned how to write without the tequila and get past that. But
I'm relieved to hear that. Otherwise, we'd be in big trouble.
And I hardly even, my wife about 15 years ago developed a very serious allergy to alcohol. And so we don't even have wine anymore. I don't drink at all because it's not fair that I could get plastered and put the world away and she can't, she can't like make it go away. So I suffer with her.
Have you replaced it with other mind-numbing substances? No, you haven't?
No. I never was
Okay, you can
much for
tell us,
smoking.
just us and a few hundred other people who are listening.
What?
I said, it's fine. You can just tell me, because just me and a few other hundred people who will see this video.
Oh, okay. So it's just pretty private.
Exactly.
That's good.
So, but the whole tone of it is so charming. I mean, for anybody who hasn't read the book, and I feel like there's probably very few people out there, but the people who haven't read the book who happen to be watching this, the tone of it, the only way I can describe it is a little bit like, not like a car, not like like Cavalier and Clay, um, like a graphic novel, a little like a graphic novel. Do you
Well,
feel
thank
like
you.
that's accurate? I mean,
I appreciate that. Thank you.
it's short, it's pithy, it's got, you read it in bites, it's got amazing pictures, it's totally accessible to everybody. It's brilliant.
Except the California prison, except the California Department of Prisons. Now, what I would say, one of the things as a psychoanalyst, what did I try to do with this book? And hopefully if you were to read it, you wouldn't think that this was a shrink who was writing it. But I tried to deal with the issue of shame.
I just want to interrupt you. I'm looking down because I'm trying to make sure I see comments that come in. I'm totally listening. So go, keep talking.
Okay, I tried to somehow or another help people get past shame and just to be able to enjoy talking to a partner about sex. And if the book can do that, if it can help with that, then I've done my job. Now, of course, I'm working on the 10th edition, and that's kind of scary because I didn't think I'd live to see the 5th edition.
But can we just talk about the first edition? Because
sure.
When I found the book, so let's see, when I found the book, you can tell me what edition it was. So it was about 20 years ago. So about 2000. It was so thick. And as I grew as a sex therapist, the book grew as well. So talk a little bit about that for a minute.
Okay. I published the first edition, was about 270 pages. But each new edition, there were things that I needed to cover and chapters that I felt were important. So I kept adding and adding and adding chapters. The book got to be 1,100 pages. And the edition before—
When I call it the Bible of sex, I am not actually joking. Like, I seriously, it was so big. So, okay, so can you talk about things you added along the way? Like, what things that jumped out at you that you felt like, oh my God, I can't believe I missed this.
Sex and disability, sex during pregnancy. There were chapters on kink. There were chapters on, I just, I expanded things, and sex in the military. It just grew and grew and grew. And I would spend hours and hours on each paragraph. So this wasn't an easy job. I would put as much work into each new edition as most authors put into an entire book. But what then happened? Oh, go ahead.
No,
what then happened?
I was just curious if were people like writing to you and saying, could you write on this? Or were physicians telling you that? Or were patients telling you that? Or there's just things that you came across yourself?
Okay. After about the second edition, I set up an online sex survey, an anonymous sex survey. And over the years, I had it up. Over 5,000 women and 4,000 men took it. And this wasn't just, I decided I was going to do a sex survey that had no, on a scale of 1 to 5, what is your answer? None of that stuff. Most sex surveys are set up so they can be computer scored and read. I had a 35 question sex survey with all open answers. You had to answer your own words. So over the years, I learned a lot.
Have you ever been psychoanalyzed and diagnosed?
Oh God, yes, years in analysis.
35, okay, go on.
And so, my wife would help me go through these, and they were wonderful. And so I learned so much from people. And here's something that's kind of funny, you'll enjoy this. People would always say, well, when I'd write reader responses from the surveys and include them in the book, people would say, why do you have so many from women and so few from men? Here's the story. We could tell most straight men's surveys from women's surveys just by opening it. The women's surveys, they would answer 3-4 sentences per question, sometimes 3 or 4 paragraphs per question. The straight guys usually would answer in monosyllabic grunts at best. Maybe sometimes a sentence, And so women were much more verbal about their sexuality and their sexual feelings than straight guys. And so that's been an interesting thing. And let's talk about that a little bit later. Let's talk some more about that if we can, because I think it's helpful.
But we could talk more about that now. But okay, I'll come back to it.
Okay. Well, the book grew and grew and grew. And then when I was about to do the last edition, the 9th edition, my distributor, who distributes the books into bookstores, they called and said, okay, dude, here's the story. We can't sell an 1,100-page book anymore. This isn't 1990. People won't buy 1,100-page books. Get it down to 500. This is like saying, okay, cut your arm and leg off.
What year was that? He said that to you?
This was 2017, 16, 17. So, God, I got it down to like 650 pages. That was the best I could do. And what was really cool is for the ebook version, I could include all the chapters I had to take out for the printed book. So that's interesting. Also, something just to realize how sex has changed. When I was ready to publish the first edition, no publisher would publish it. I had to self-publish it.
Wait, can we focus on that for a second? That is mind-boggling to me. When you told me that, I said the joke's on them because this is the best-selling sex book out there. Seriously. And that's amazing. Like, they said to you it wouldn't sell or it wasn't appropriate?
They said it wasn't enough like The Joy of Sex. And they said it has a sense of humor and people don't want that in a book on sex. And it just gave me the feeling that editors in major book publishers have no sense of humor. But yeah, they said it was too much of it had an attitude, they said.
Don't you think in a certain way, Paul, that is the biggest problem that we have? Like, I feel like people take sex too seriously in a weird way. Like, and that is maybe the brilliance of the book, is that it humanizes it, makes it like, it's okay. We're all in this together. None of us know what we're doing. It's fine. It's,
Yeah.
let's laugh, so that's astonishing. It was the sense of humor piece of it, because the joy of sex
yeah, that's a good reminder to me in working on the 10th edition, because it's gotten worse in terms of we're not allowed to have a sense of humor about sex, because God knows you use the wrong pronoun, you're going to insult a number of social justice warriors, right? Or we have to constantly worry that we might say something that might insult that 1 in 500 people whose particular leanings are that way. We really can't speak to the majority anymore. It's scary. We're so afraid as sex educators to say anything that's funny or fun because, God knows who you're going to offend. And so that's a good reminder, is to remember the book has to have that sense of humor and that edge. So thank you. I appreciate that. That was worth 2 bottles. That was worth 2 bottles of tequila. I appreciate it.
Are you working on another edition now?
Yes, I'm just starting on it. I've been avoiding it like the plague, let me tell you.
Why do you need to do a new edition?
Okay, things change. First of all, I've got over 400 research articles, PDFs that I've set aside over the years. Okay, we're getting more and more research. We're learning more and more. We're learning more about what we don't know, and so that's always important.
So what do you think you might add in this edition? Well, give us all the like preview. What do you might add in this edition?
Well, okay, I've just been in communication with one of the top researchers in the world on something called clitoral pulse amplitude. And it's interesting because the clitoris will pulse as a woman becomes more sexually aroused. And they're just starting to learn more about this. It used to be that when we did research on women's sexuality, you know, they'd stick that plasmograph thing in it's like a tampon. Yep. And it would measure blood flow in a woman's vagina.
And secretion, right? Blood flow and secretion, or do I have that wrong?
A blood flow volume and how the blood flow will increase as a woman.
Wait, blood flow volume and also vaginal secretion as well? Did it measure both or just the blood flow?
Just the blood flow.
Okay.
Okay, and then now we've suddenly got these little devices that'll fit over a clitoris without being overwhelming. And the first 3 studies with this are just coming out now. And if you think about it, it's really the clitoris that you should be measuring changes in, not the vagina. And so this is going to open up a whole new world of understanding more about women's sexuality. So it's really cool.
It's really cool. Where are those studies being done? And I'm embarrassed I don't know about them.
Oh, don't worry. I'll PDF you one just to punish you.
Do you know where those studies are doing?
The Journal of Sexual Medicine, I believe, has.
The studies are being done where? In Europe, probably. I'm assuming, not America.
Yeah, some in Europe. Eric Jansen did one of them. I'll have to. I haven't looked at where.
Fine. So there's more research coming out that you feel like significantly changes things.
Yeah, and we're starting to learn that we don't know as much about men's sexuality as we thought we did.
About men's sexuality?
Men's sexuality, yes.
That gets us back to the fact that they don't write sentences.
They're not as verbal. So, yes, but when that first edition came out, there was what was called a sex tax back then. And what it meant was, I felt I wanted to publish it in its 270-page book. And this was 25 years ago. For heaven's sakes, $12.95 was a lot of money then. And everyone told me, no one's going to buy it if it's only $12.95. People expect to pay way more for a book on sex. They won't think it's any good if it's $12.95. You need to make it at least $19.95. Because if it doesn't have a sex tax, people won't trust that it's good. Fast forward all these years, suddenly we've got Pornhub. You've got the most explicit porn in history that the average middle schooler is able to watch for free. In this day and age now, it's hard to even sell a book on sex. And people don't want to read. Why would you want to read about sex if you could just watch porn and jerk off to it? But here's the problem. Porn has become the world sex educator. I have no trouble with people watching porn and enjoying it. I think that's just fine. But as a sex educator, in terms of being your source of sex education, oh my God, it's just not. I mean, women in porn want to do anything a guy wants to do the second his penis gets hard. They don't need to talk about anything. Anal sex, he just pops her over and sticks that thing up her butt. No lube, no talking, no nothing. And so it's fascinating. So why do you have to have new editions? Well, for the first edition.
I just want to say that my friend Kat Dukes, you may know her. She's an amazing sex educator. She says her line is, learning about sex from porn is like learning how to drive by watching the Fast and the Furious.
Yes, exactly. The Fast and the Furious. I've used that in a video. Yes. Yes. It's exactly. You know, and unfortunately, we've got this whole section of people who want to shame people who watch porn. No, you shouldn't shame people for watching the Fast and Furious. You just shouldn't drive that way. Right? But, okay.
New
So,
editions. We're talking about new editions.
okay, first edition, there was no internet. There was no Pornhub. The latest edition, hey, again, the average middle schooler has watched Pornhub. There was no Tinder, there was no Grindr, there was no internet dating. Back then, you talked on the phone, you called someone. Now, in this generation, you call someone up and ask them for a date, and they're going to think you're creepy. There's a whole ritual now. You get there, you hopefully, can text them, be befriended by them. And there's this whole ritual. You do not phone them until way down the line, or they'll think you're stalking them.
Right.
So all these things have changed. So while our genitals look the same, there was no such thing as swipe right, even 2 editions ago. So just, and 2 editions, 1 edition ago, you'd use the term smartphone. Now, if you use the term smartphone, they think you're an old fart. All phones are smart now, unless you're using a burner and doing a drug deal. There is no such thing as a phone now, although it's like a burner or a flip phone. They're all smart. So you don't call them smartphones. So I could go on and bore you to death, but there's constant changes to be able to sound like you've got a book that's new and speaks to 20-year-olds, 25-year-olds. And yeah.
The truth is I should have looked this up before I had talked to you, because I should know the answer to this, but do you deal with the medical piece of it too? Like the book that I have coming out really splits it into, has all the medical and the psychological, because I think they all work in tandem, but there's so many like online, like Get Roman, like all, do you deal with that in the newest edition of the books?
What do you mean? Help
like
me out.
Viagra and the medicines for the guys. Do you address them in the books or not so much?
Oh yeah. I talk about boner drugs, and again, there's now a new boner drug that wasn't there the last edition.
Boner drugs.
Yeah. What we talk about, what I like to talk about too, is what's fascinating is the different side effects that the different ones have and why. And if you look at the side effects, then you can kind of understand how they work. And yes, we kind of have an issue with younger guys thinking that I need to take a boner drug because guys in porn take nearly toxic doses of boner drugs. How do you think they keep it up for 4 hours during porn shoots?
Right.
So yeah, I think we need to talk about that. Books need to talk about understanding that dudes in porn are probably have the 5% largest penises.
And camera angles that make them look even larger, right? Like when you talk to somebody who directs these movies or produces these movies, they'll tell you it takes them 20 minutes to kind of get sort of underneath so that they get the penis looking really, really big.
Oh yes, and they have little gadgets that help them look like they're squirting lots of cum.
Right.
That just doesn't happen in real life. And I think there's so much. A book written about, for me, my type of book written about sex needs to really look at sex through the eyes of someone who never knew about anything before Pornhub.
So that is a huge change. I mean, honestly, Paul, as you talk about it, that is a huge change,
Right. And people whose whole world exists through the display of their iPhone. First and second edition, phones were wired to the wall and you had to press them to dial in this book. Now you've got people who can't go to sleep at night without having their phone next to their pillow.
Right.
Who can't wake up in the morning, first thing they do before they pee is to check their phone. So it's a very different world.
So what, if you had to look back and say one of the most gratifying either experiences or stories or reactions to your book or people that you've met, something?
Getting to meet people like you. I would never have gotten to meet you. That's what's been so wonderful, is the people I've been able to meet. That's been the amazing thing.
So I want to tell you that I give your book as often as engagement gifts or wedding gifts. And
Oh,
I have had people tell me that that book really changed their life. So I can't imagine you
wow.
having people say that, because these are people, look, sometimes I deal with more traditional young couples and they have no background. So freeing. And except that you live in Oregon where there's no people, but other than that, I cannot imagine that people aren't coming up to you all the time saying, Paul, this book changed my life.
You know, it's hard for me to take that in. They do, and I can't quite believe it, because I can't quite believe that a book would change anyone's life, or that anything I've written would change anyone's life. So that's kind of just hard for me to take in.
Okay, this is making me very sad. I want to say this to you. This is making me very sad because that book it's seismic. Like, can I tell you, when I first read the book 20 years ago, I'm going to tell you something that I read in it that I remember resonated with me. 20 years, I remember this, where you said early on, it was something about, you look at the jock who, like this really good looking jock who's got the gorgeous girlfriend, and you think, oh, he must be having great sex. And then you look at the little nerdy guy in the computer lab and you think, oh, he's not getting any. And that nothing could be further from the truth. And I feel like it was just perfect the way you said it. And over the years, I see women all the time who you look at and you think, oh, they're sex pots. They must have fabulous rocking sex lives. And then you see women who are like dowdy or just, like just plain old grandmas. And you think they must not be having, and they're having amazing sex. And
Yeah.
I feel like you put that out there straight up. I think it was at the very beginning of your book, one of the earlier editions. Am I wrong? Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, it's hopefully it's still in there. I'll have to check, because last edition I had to prune so much. I think I'm going to go back and actually look over the first couple of editions and make sure that things are in there like that I didn't take them out in desperation. But that's such an important reminder for me, because also being your own publisher, I have to deal so much with the business world. I forget about the book itself. I see it as a widget. I'm worried about stock. I'm worried about returns. I'm worried about, what kind of paper are we going to use? What kind of font are we going to use? And I tend to lose sight that the book is actually helpful for people. And so this is an important reminder.
Over the years, have you not been approached by publishers who want to take it on, or that hasn't happened once you self-publish?
A couple of times. Random House wanted to take it, and I was ready to sell it to them. And they were going to take the 4th and 5th edition. And then they turned me over to their business affairs person, who was one of the biggest dicks I have ever dealt with in my life. And I'm going to start swearing.
You're watching Random House. You should. I hope that guy got sacked, because it was stupid.
No, but here's the story. He sent me this boilerplate contract that offered no protection for me and all protection for Random House. It would have destroyed me if they wanted to do something bad about the book. And so I said to him, that's not right. And he said, hey, this is like a marriage. You've got to trust each other. And I said, well, here's our marriage. You've got 2 entire floors of legal. I've got my wife. She doesn't know much about publishing law. And if we had to hire an attorney, I would have to come up with $50,000. And by the time I sued Random House, you would paper me to death. And, he's just a dick. And so it was a reminder of kind of what it's like dealing with, and why I kept the book, because at least I could control it, and I could make sure that they wouldn't put some cover on it that I was embarrassed about, or they wouldn't take something out. But anyway, so that's the story.
Well, we have to so we only have a couple more minutes. I can't believe we're out of time already. I'm going to have to bring you back. But wait, I want to know, before we finish up, what else that you think is important to say? Or did you want to say something more about the fact that men never write and women write volumes?
Okay, let me say 2 important things. One is, I can't wait to read your book. So I'm looking forward to that manuscript arriving. So that's great.
Paul made my day by saying he would write a blurb on the book. So I hope he still feels that way after he sees it, but I'm like so excited. It's like your hero. You're a hero.
Oh,
Anyway, okay, but anyhow,
I,
okay.
I would be
So
so honored. Okay, let's talk about real quick. Let's see, at a sex conference for ASEC, it's a big organization of sex educators. They had a conference every year back before Zoom. And, my wife and I were at the airport and we picked up and there were two guys looking for a rental car. There wasn't one. And turns out that they were going to the conference and one of them deals with men tremendously. He has men's groups. And great guy. And I'd always respected his work. Finally met him. And we were talking and he said, yeah, I've got my straight men's groups and my gay men's groups. And I said, how come? That seems strange. Why don't you mix them? And he said, oh, I used to. But what would happen is the gay guys would do all the heavy lifting and the straight guys would just sit back and not say anything because the straight guys didn't have language to express their feelings like the gay guys did. So he said, I ended up having to separate them. And for the straight guys, a lot of the work is helping them learn language and to be able to really deep dig inside. Now, I don't know if you see that much or not in your practice. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe this is just a sampling of the guys he has in his groups.
that and all the guys who answered your survey, right? And of course,
yes.
Of course we see it. I mean, I deal with women more than men, but of course we see it. And that is a huge problem with people's sex lives because people have to talk in order to have good sex. Like you have to talk in order to be able to communicate what you need and what you want. And
yes.
you have to listen.
Yeah. And I think guys are, a lot of times guys are expected to know what to do instantly. And a lot of times women won't communicate with guys and tell them what they want. It goes both ways.
Right.
And so, and if, as one of the first people who I consulted with on my book, she's a sex worker. She was an escort and she'd been with women and men. And she again said, I don't know how guys do it because each woman's body is different. You have to learn all over again with each one. Each one's clitoris, the way you touch it is different.
Powerful. That is so powerful. But you don't feel like that's true about men to a certain degree also?
Not quite as much because it's kind of hanging out there. And I think woman's sexual arousal is just as mental as it is physical. If you were to stick your hand in a guy's pants, he would probably thank you. If you stuck your hand in a woman's pants and rubbed her clitoris, she might scream in pain, right? There has to be a process. It used to be, I'll finish up by telling you about a talk. I love talking at colleges and can't anymore because of COVID. But at the end of a talk I gave at UC Santa Barbara, a couple came up to me, a young couple, and they thanked me for the talk. And I said, okay, what struck you about it? Why are you coming up here to thank me? And he said, well, first of all, I thought I had premature ejaculation. And he said, I guess I don't. And I said, how long do you last? And he said, 8 to 10 minutes. Well, from watching porn, he always thought he came too soon. And I said, wait a minute, is that 8 to 10 minutes of real thrusting, or is that like parallel parking thrusting, where you just one in and wait a minute and then one? Oh no, he said, that's heavy thrusting. And so I turned to her and I said, what was it for you? And she said, oh, thank God. She said, I thought there was something wrong with me because it really does take me about 20 minutes of foreplay before I'm ready to have intercourse. And I always thought that a woman should be ready the second he's hard. Well, we don't use the word foreplay much anymore because we're afraid of offending that one woman out of 10 who's ready to go the second the guy drops his pants. but she said she never really heard about foreplay. And I told this group, you know, it used to be, we would say women tend to need, a lot of women need at least 20 minutes of kissing, caressing, fooling around before a penis goes inside their vagina. And so that was a big relief for her. So that was fascinating. And it reminded me, oh my God, we're not doing a very good job with sex education.
We are doing a terrible job. We are doing a terrible job with sex education, but your book, I feel, has done more than anything else that's out there. We have to stop. I want you to tell me you'll come back with me again in a couple of months. If I don't harass you too much, will you come back and do this again with me?
Oh, you better harass me. I'll be there.
That's amazing. I thank you so, so much for being on. I'm going to say good night. You stay on, Paul, but I'm going to end the live. Everybody, thanks for watching. And Paul promises he's going to come back again.
Thank you so much.
The guide to getting it on, go out and get yourself a copy of it immediately. The small
But be sure you get the 9th edition or the ebook version. I hate it when people get the 3rd edition. Amazon's selling them for outrageous amounts. You shouldn't pay any more than $15 for the book.
Okay, well, you know, we were just thinking about that because I told you we're the Ultimate Sex Book Club. We're using that book, and then Kat Dukes was like, "Which edition should I use?" And I said, "Well, if you use the Unzipped, then you know that it's in all the editions, right? There's really not. Is there anything new in Unzipped, or is mostly the same stuff?"
It's Unzipped is the new edition, the 9th edition.
Exactly. So there we go. So I think that's the one we're going to use. So thank you so much. I'm going to blow you a kiss, and I'm going to say goodnight to everybody else.
Thank you.
I just need to figure out how to shut down the live. Yeah, there we go.